housewife falls for the seduction of a Frenchman whom she meets in New York by chance. Infidelity leads them to an unexpected end. Subscribe and comment on what you would do for love. The story begins in New York. We meet Connie, a housewife who is dedicated to household chores, and her husband Edward, who is a loving man at night, but too busy during the day. They have a small child together. One morning Connie is walking through the streets of New York, but she has difficulty walking because there is a strong gust of wind. While she is looking for a taxi, she bumps into a strange Frenchman who is carrying many books. Both of them fall. Connie gets up and takes a seat. The man introduces himself as Paul. He tries to stop a taxi for Connie, but when he sees her injured knees he invites her to come into his apartment. Connie accepts and is surprised by the large number of books that take up the entire apartment. Paul is dedicated to buying and selling books. After cleaning the wound, Connie thanks him and leaves. Paul stops her. Before leaving, he gives her a book. He guides her through his entire apartment until she chooses a book. Connie proceeds to read, but Paul finishes the sentence he was reading, thanks her for everything and says goodbye. When she gets home she tells her son that she fell. He rushes to get a camera to take a picture. Edward comes home and she tells him what happened. Edward makes little jokes about the young man who helped him, not expecting what was to come. Later, Edward shows her a camera he bought, plays with Connie, but she has other intentions with him. They were about to have a meeting but her son interrupts the moment. She couldn't sleep. The next day Connie looks at the book that the Frenchman gave her. When she opens it his business card falls out. Connie goes to a phone and calls him, thanks him for the previous day, and he asks her to go see him for a coffee. Connie accepts. In the apartment Paul shows her a book in Braille, asks her to close her eyes and give him her hand. Paul begins to read it, making Connie noticeably nervous. The protagonist goes to Edward's office. She feels guilty for going to see Paul, so she brings him a gift. Connie feels even more guilty when she sees photos of her family on her husband's desk. Her husband asks her what was wrong, but Connie changes the subject. Night comes. Connie was cleaning and expected a caress from Edward, but on the contrary, he only left her more things to wash. The next day Connie visits Paul again. She is nervous, but she likes and is excited by Paul's welcome. The man had music, so he invited her to dance. The dance started with light movements that ended in almost a kiss. The moment was interrupted because the music stops. Connie tells him that it is a mistake, but Paul tells her that mistakes do not exist. Connie leaves, but returns because she forgot her coat. Paul takes advantage and hugs her and takes her to his bed. They have a very intense encounter. Time passes and Connie leads a double life. While at home she shows herself as a loving mother and wife. At her lover's house she fulfills her deepest desires. Time passes and Paul invites her to eat, but they are discovered by Tom, who is an old friend of Edward and is leaving the restaurant. Night comes and Connie notices a drawing that her lover made her and tries to erase it, but Edward goes in with her to bathe. Edward tries to be intimate with her. He begins with caresses, but she rejects him. Connie gets up and goes to bed. The next day Edward was going to work, but when he noticed the clothes his wife was going to wear, he decided to wait for her. Connie distracts her husband by inventing an appointment at the beauty salon. Edward suspects that something was wrong and calls the beauty salon asking about his wife's appointment. Indeed, there is no record of the appointment. Connie was arriving at Paul's apartment, but when she was about to enter she met up with some old friends. Together they went to a nearby cafe. Upon entering, Connie calls Paul and tells him that they are in a nearby cafe with some friends and asks him to wait for her while she is with them. However, Paul arrives and orders a coffee, gets up and goes to the bathroom. Connie goes after him and together they go into the bathroom. Her friends stay talking, while Connie has a passionate encounter with Paul in the bathroom. Connie returns to her friends and Paul returns to the bar as if nothing had happened. The friends comment that the guy at the bar is very attractive. One of the women makes a comment about having a date with him, an adventure that no one would find out about, but the other tells her that it would end very badly. She did it many years ago and it ended badly for her, and she ended up falling in love. They have their moment alone. Connie asks Paul to end the romance before someone gets hurt. She always thinks about him and begins to fall in love, but Paul doesn't want to end it, and on the contrary they have a moment of passion. At the office Edward has a fight with Tom, who before leaving warns him to keep a better eye on his family. This highlights all the suspicions he has about his wife, so he decides to hire a private investigator. At dinner time, Edward tells her that he will go on a trip for a few days, so the next day, as soon as her husband leaves, she gets ready and goes with Paul to the movies, and without caring about anything, they have a passionate encounter. They spend the day together and don't realize that they were being photographed. Days go by and Connie tries to find Paul, but he doesn't answer her anymore. This leaves her devastated. At the same time, the investigator confirms to Edward what he already suspected. Connie is still affected, and in one of her visits to the apartment she finds him holding the hand of another girl. Connie stops and follows him to a bookstore. Upon entering, she finds him kissing her. In a fit of jealousy she confronts him, but Paul takes her to his apartment where he calms her down and they have a moment of passion. At the same time, Edouard arrives by surprise. Before entering, he turned around and by chance Connie runs out of the apartment. Edward finally decides to enter and arrives with Paul, who already knows why he is there. Edward enters and asks about the things he does, but is surprised to know that Paul knows of his existence, knows of his family, and knows that they have recurring talks about him. When exploring the apartment, he finds the bed that shows signs of having been used minutes ago, but what destroys Edward is having found a sphere that he had given to Connie for their anniversary. Edward feels betrayed and angry and could not avoid reacting badly and repeatedly hits Paul in the head, and after a few seconds he falls, sending him to heaven. Edward calms down and, seeing what he did, begins to clean the place and at the same time hears his wife call Paul. She leaves him a message where she says that they should end the relationship since he is hurting her family. Edward continues and takes the body out of the building, puts it in his trunk and hurries to get to his son's work. When he finishes, he returns home. But at night, when everyone is asleep, he leaves the house, drives away from the city and enters a dump and throws Paul out and quickly escapes. He returns home and takes a shower, but he is noticeably affected by the situation. Some time later, the New York police are looking for Paul's whereabouts. They go to Connie because his name and number were in her apartment. The police tell her that Paul is married and his wife is worried about his whereabouts. Connie is surprised, but tells them that she doesn't know him. She once bought him a book, but she doesn't know anything about him. So, the police, having no clues, decide to leave. Time passes, the couple's life continues as normal, until one morning the police visit them again. It turns out that they found Paul in a dumpster. The police begin to interrogate Connie. They think she was having an affair with him, but Edward defends her and asks them to leave. Days later, Connie went to drop off clothes at the dry cleaners, Edward's clothes, and after checking the pockets, she finds an envelope with the photos. This discovery leaves her upset. She never imagined that her husband knew everything. Both try to continue with their lives, but at a party, Connie finds the sphere that she gave to Paul and then deduces that Edward ended him. Night comes and Connie confronts him. Upset, she asks him and claims for what he did, but Edward tells her that he always knew that she cheated on him and he gave everything for his family and she paid him in the worst way. Edward tells her that he did not want to do that to him, but to her, this leaves her affected, and as the days passed she distanced herself more and nothing improved. One day Connie checks the ball that Edward gave her and finds a note from him. It said how wonderful she is and how lucky he feels to be with her. Connie accepts her mistake and burns all the photos with Paul, remembering the day she met him. Imagining how things happened, Edward finds her burning the photos and asks her what they should do. Edward tells her that he will turn himself in, however Connie asks him not to. He tells her that no one will know and they will try to move on. They try to continue with their lives, but Connie continues to be affected and they both decide to escape the country and start new lives. Don't forget to subscribe and comment what you are capable of doing for love.